Hello everybody and welcome to Retro Tuesday, where we play games from yesteryear, and we've been playing Final Fantasy IV, or Final Fantasy II as it was known on the Super Nintendo in the West back in the day on the Super Nintendo. We've been playing that through the last couple of weeks, and I figured we'd continue on. We're having a good time with it. So yes, we are going to continue on with Final Fantasy II this week. To catch people up who maybe have missed the last couple of streams and or maybe will catch this stream on playback later on, months or years down the track, we're up to the third kind of major dungeon in tonight. Tonight's questing, we'll delve into the third dungeon. So in terms of where the story's at, Cecil has met with Ed, the foolish, the spoony bard, as he's well known as. Ed's lost the love of his life, Anna, to an attack by the evil empire that Cecil was formerly a part of. And they've all basically sworn revenge. And the next step in their quest is to go to a dungeon to defeat some monsters, collect a item, gem, I believe it was, back in these days. It might still be a gem. It might have always been a gem. But anyway, use that item to rescue Rosa, the white mage love interest for Cecil, who has found herself quite sick. There's only one item that can revive her, and we are on a quest for that. That's probably what we'll get through in tonight's stream, which will last for about an hour or so, like usual. And we'll have a good chat along the way, talk classic RPG, and hopefully a couple of people jump on to joining our stream. So we will give people another moment or two just to log on if they're interested. Hopefully there's a couple of people that drop by to say hello, and once we have done that, we will get straight into the action. So as usual, I'm not entirely sure if I've set this thing up correctly. I can't hear my own voice while I'm talking, so I can't actually test sound levels when I actually start the live stream. I've kind of tried to guess what the right levels would be, that you'll hear a little bit of music in the background as we play, but you'll also hear me loud and clear. So if at any stage you have trouble listening, any watchers, please do feel free to say something, and I will try to adjust the levels live, but hopefully I've got it right. I think I did. Okay, so if we jump into things. So last time when we finished up, I was once again in a need to do a bit of grinding, because we'd just gone through a dungeon, we'd just met Ed the Spoony Bard, and Ed was a little bit underleveled. So what I've done in the past week is just gone and leveled up the characters a bit, not too much, but enough that you don't have to watch me grinding away. I think Ed was level 6 at the end of last week's stream, so now as you can see he is level 11. So I've done 5 levels of grinding. That should be enough to make sure that we're able to get through the dungeon without needing to retreat and do all those other boring things that you don't really want to watch on a stream. Took me about half an hour, so as you can see the time clock now says 2 hours and 45. Of that, about 2 hours has been play live on stream, and about 45 minutes has been me grinding in between to make sure that my character levels are up there. Because one of the delightful things about JRPGs of yesteryear is they did indeed require grinding. The level spikes of enemies in dungeons were such that you did have to do the old trick of running around in a circle for 20 minutes, 30 minutes at a time at times, just to make sure your characters were leveled up enough that they were ready for the next difficulty spike. So here we go, we jump into it. Now we're back at the desert. So this is the town where Rosa is. We'll just drop in quickly to say hello to Rosa, just so people who maybe haven't seen the stream beforehand, or are new, or watching this again on playback, know exactly where we are up to. So here's Rosie here. She is still sick and doesn't say much at all. And we need to go and get the items, the ingredients to craft the healing potion for her. So that's what we were trying to do last week, but we got a little bit sidetracked with Ed's story and introduction. There was another character involved by the name of Teller, an old man wizard. He was Anna's father, and he is rather distraught and left us in the middle of the after attacking Ed out of anger, he then got in a huff and up and left. So we don't know where he is right now. That's where we're up with Final Fantasy IV. If you've never played this game before, it moves along at a cracking pace, which is we're not so used to that these days. JRPGs, or in fact games in general, take longer to play through, whereas back in these days, things were nice and brief and to the point. So in that 2 hours and 45, we've got about enough plot that in a JRPG of today would probably take about 10 hours. I mean, if it was a Persona 5, we'd be about 10 hours into the game at this point. So we're in a hovercraft. That was an item we picked up last week. That lets us travel over these rocks, the shallows in the ocean. We can't actually go into the water right just yet. We need a different ship to do that, but it does let us get to where we need to. There's the castle that got destroyed in last week. That's where Ed and Anna were living. So, because Ed is a prince, he was the prince of this castle. There's not much to be a prince of anymore, but that's where he's at. And we now need to go to the east. So I'll do that. Hopefully, I really hope that I'm not speaking into the void right now, and at least it'll come back through, or it'll come through on feedback for people that are watching. It is Tuesday night, I know, and I've probably picked the worst time to do these streams, actually. I have probably picked the times where absolutely nobody's around and wanting to watch people play video games. So there's a couple of places we can go now, thanks to this hovercraft. One is this one, so you can see the little winding path there, that's into the mountains. Now we don't actually need to do that yet, and there's some pretty powerful enemies in there, so that's where I actually went to grind up some experience levels for Ed. That is coming, but yeah, it's interesting to note that though Final Fantasy IV is a very linear game, in terms of its narrative, of course, and it's certainly not open world in design in terms of being able to go out and do side quests galore and stuff. You do need to stick to the plot pretty closely. It is interesting to know that it is now possible to go off track and end up going to places you didn't need to. If you go in there, you come across a roadblock pretty much immediately, but yeah, it's interesting that you can be sidetracked. So this is the actual this is a cave that we need to go to in order to progress the narrative. So yeah, I'm just going to give people another second or two to jump on before we actually get into the real question and the real interesting part of the stream. Otherwise, we'll jump in and people who are watching it on playback can enjoy it. Oh, hello, Sean. Welcome. I'm hoping you can hear me. You're the first person to actually jump on and say hello, so it seems to be a quiet night. It might just be you and I chatting along about classic JRPGs today. That is assuming that you can actually hear me clearly enough. Otherwise, you're speaking into the void and I'm speaking into the void. Okay, so since we have got somebody watching, yay, I feel good about that. That's a relief. It's actually quite awkward to think that you might be doing a stream but with absolutely nobody watching, and then you need to fill an hour by talking to yourself. That's a difficult proposition indeed. Right, so, dungeon, let's go in. Yeah, Ed, good old Ed. I was good in the week. You probably missed that. I was good this week. Look at what I did. I leveled Ed up to level 11. So, you know, I ground my way through. I ground and ground and ground. Hello, Dithy Ram. Welcome to the stream. I assume by sexuality you mean Edward's hair, because look at that. That is gorgeous hair. Even back in those days, that is very flowing locks of golden hair. Okay, enough about hair. This is the next dungeon we're in. So, like I said, we're looking for a monster of some description that has a item that can cure Rosa of her affliction. And, of course, Rosa being the love interest, we want to do that. In the meantime, we have to fight a whole lot of enemies along the way. And they're starting to get a bit tougher and more impressive in the sense that they can do things that are not pleasant. I have possibly slightly overleveled my characters. I might find some of these battles a little bit easy. Yes, I really did think that that is the one problem with doing a JRPG on a stream, is just the potential that you'll have to do some grinding on screen, which is just, yeah, it's not the most interesting part of the experience. I'm still able to do it because I grew up playing these things, and I guess Stockholm Syndrome, I actually like it in a sense now, but yeah, I would never subject my audience to that, let's put it that way. Anyway, lots of chests to collect, plenty of gold, lots of treasure. There'll be plenty of random enemies along the way. Ah, yes, Oblivion. Yeah, the one thing, I mean, I totally get the criticisms that people level at grinding, because grinding is a thing, but the one thing I'm not a fan of is games where the enemy levels kind of scale with you, because then you start to wonder what's the actual point of having an experience system in the first place if every time you get a level, you know, enemies get a level as well. They did that to a lesser extent with some of the Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy VIII for example, and not a big fan of that. I would rather be able to overlevel and that be my decision, my play decision. Now, with that said, I quite liked Oblivion. A lot about Oblivion, anyway. It was a big step up from Morrowind in terms of its visual fidelity and stuff. And for a game like that, that's kind of important. So, yeah, spend too much time playing Oblivion. And speaking of Elder Scrolls, for people who are tuning into the thing or whatever later on as well, the Elder Scrolls Blades game was released on Nintendo Switch last week. I still don't know if I'm actually going to write a thing about it, because it offends me on pretty much every level, but that's the free-to-play mobile game that Bethesda, in its infinite wisdom, decided to release on Nintendo Switch as well, after being on mobile for God knows, 2 years or whatever, and for whatever reason they never paid attention to any of the feedback that people didn't really like this game. So yeah, they're cashing in on Switch owners. Don't play it, it is terrible. It's an insult to the very concept of Elder Scrolls. Yeah, that's true as well. I totally agree with you there. Diddy Ram, I totally agree with you that if any game where the ability to defeat enemies scales at the same rate that the enemies scale in difficulty, the whole progression system just feels very arbitrary as a result. And yeah, it's something that I think JRPG developers have grappled with to lesser or greater extent in the recently. Some do a pretty good job, but a lot don't. And yes, it is really, really bad. I actually spent, this is the Elder Scrolls Blade game, I actually spent about maybe 4 or 5 hours playing it over the weekend, just because I was hoping that I'd find something to appreciate about the game midway through, and nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's woeful. It's an insult to Elder Scrolls. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know if anybody... That's the thing, I don't get a lot of these mobile games that are popular console games, and then the developers try and do a mobile version of it in a way that makes it a mobile game first and just kind of uses the license. I mean, who are they trying to appeal? Are they trying to appeal to existing Elder Scrolls fans? If so, nobody's going to like it, because yeah, if they're trying to find new fans for Elder Scrolls, they might play the mobile game for nothing, never pay for it, but then never graduate to the proper games either. The same thing with that Fallout Shelter game. I just don't get the use of the license in a way that doesn't add to the franchise in some way. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a really good way to put it. That games that can be broken, they encourage people to play. And I mean, we are talking about video games here. Play is part of it. If you can break it, then you're playing around with it. So I actually think that that is something to admire about some of these games. For example, I really love getting good and over-leveled with Final Fantasy... which one? 6. Final Fantasy 6. I had a great time getting really over-leveled and spending a lot of time on stupid weak monsters just so I could roll my way through after that. I don't know why, it was just fun being able to one-hit everything. I was really addicted to Final Fantasy 6 though. I play that game a lot. So I will definitely stream that at some point. I guess it'll be Final Fantasy 3 since I'm playing the Super NES ones here. Oh, how did you find Disaster Report 4 overall? Because I was one of the few champions for that one in the media. That was a very unpopular game with a lot of people, but I found a lot to appreciate with it. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about it while we're wandering our way through this dungeon of the monstrous doomed. Yeah, there's a surprisingly large number of stories that you probably will miss. The game is, in terms of its storytelling, it's surprisingly open a lot of the time. Yeah, true story. I started to play Disaster Report on the Switch, and then I figured that there was probably something in there that I would like, but I was really struggling with the Switch one, so I reached out to the publisher and said, look, can you kind of give me a copy of the PS4 one instead? And they complied, so I got the better experience. But yeah, I can totally see that if you just play the Switch one, you might find it a little bit less pleasant. It has issues, technical issues beyond what even the high tolerance people can handle. Yeah, the boat thing was tiring. The other one that I found really... The one moment of Disaster Report 4 that I really, really did not enjoy, though I get why they did it, was the stealth section where you had to slide around on your butt because you were tied up and stuck on the floor. And that was just exhausting. I found that really tiring. Yeah, a lot of people do find it very dark, and for whatever reason that kind of puts them off, but I don't know, I mean, the whole point of the game was kind of to explore how humanity responds in a crisis like that, so, you know, it's not all positive and heroism and everybody gets along kind of stuff. There's some dark stuff that happens in a disaster, and I don't think that there was any value in not exploring that as part of the narrative. Whether they did it with the adequate level of sensitivity or not is, of course, another question, and that's probably a debate for the bottom of the 5th glass of wine. But yeah, it was odd that that was as controversial as it was to me. I felt it was thematically appropriate. Now, where am I? Have I... I'm lost now. I was paying too much attention to... Ah, here we go. I got a little bit lost there for a second. I thought I was making progress, and then it looked like the start of the dungeon. There were a lot of treasure chests in this dungeon. There were a lot. A lot to hunt down. Unfortunately, most of it's pretty useless. It's like a little bit of money here and there, but I've already got plenty of money thanks to all the enemies I've killed. And I've got healing items galore. The only thing that's been really useful so far was a more powerful weapon for Ed. He's got a more powerful harp, so the music notes hit the enemy a little bit harder. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you probably are right. I could see that working as well that way. In terms of the characters I liked, I don't know. I found the I found the convenience store guy to be particularly amusing, only because it was absolutely authentic. That's exactly what would happen, to a T, if there was some kind of disaster. I imagine it would even happen in Japan, enlightened Japan, with the way it handles its disasters. I'm sure there are people that profiteer from it. Okay, we are still making good progress. I need to heal Mr. Bard. But as you can see, I've got so many items. I'm one of those guys that when I play a JRPG, I hoard, like, as much as possible. I really, really hoard items. So I end up with the maximum number by the time I go to fight the end boss. And for whatever reason, I just don't like to use items when I'm fighting enemies. I try and save and scrimp and retreat if I need to, rather than actually use my items as I go. I just have that mental image now of taking Tyrone to the convenience store guy. The cult was pretty cool. I liked the cult. That was an amusing little story. The one story that I really enjoyed, like on a genuine level, was the moment where you get to the fire barrel and everybody's trying to organize a party, and then you have that Romeo and Juliet kind of love story thing going along in the background, and you need to help them out, and then you of course get accused of being a criminal yourself. That whole narrative section was probably my favorite in terms of storytelling. I really enjoyed that bit. I enjoyed the way it all kind of linked together, and yeah, the way it depicted, I guess, destroyed Tokyo was also pretty appealing. That was a good moment. Here we go, lots of treasure chests. And a heal spot, so I don't need to use any of my items. I got a free tent out of the chest. So let's use that free tent. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, certainly from a gameplay perspective, there were a lot of moments which are not great, as traditionally we expect a video game to play, but for me, the thing about Disaster Report 4 that really resonated was just how willing the game was to compromise traditional gameplay bits in order to be a particularly thematic experience. So I always enjoy when developers do that, even if parts of it annoy me from a gameplay perspective. I would always encourage developers to go with artistic vision over making a refined game, always. Very Irem game. I don't know if I've played too many Irem games. What? Maybe it's just the time of night and I'm already exhausted from this week, but what are some of the other titles? Maybe I have played a lot of them and just can't remember, but... So I'm definitely of the right level to get through this dungeon. I'm kind of cruising through it, actually, so that's good. That's a sign that I've done things right. But I am actually now lost, because, yeah, I'm definitely lost now. That's great. That is absolutely great. Now I'm going to be wandering around like an idiot. If anyone wants to jump in and quickly tell me which way I should be going now, that would be great. Because I got a whole lot of treasure chests out of that thing, but I think I went the wrong way. Maybe it's this way. Let's go this way anyway. Yes, I did play all the Epilogue DLC stuff. Definitely did. It was actually my first disaster report as well. I'd actually never played one from that series previously, so I hear that it was a little bit different in terms of how they went about it compared to some of the others in the series. I think I backtracked away I shouldn't have. I am genuinely lost in this dungeon now. I'll try to concentrate for a second, see if I can get on top of things. I'm going to escape. I also do this every time I get lost in a JRPG. I panic for a moment and then just escape, run away from every enemy monster. Yeah, definitely there's the survival aspects in Disaster Report 4 were completely unnecessary. I don't think any of them really added anything to the experience. And to be honest, I'm not sure the morality thing did either. Simply because it was too easy to game. It made it all very... the game should have done something to more encourage you to just choose what you actually thought should have been the right response. I mean, the idea of having survival elements in a survival game makes sense. Makes perfect sense. But yeah, it needed to be much better executed than it was in that one. Now, if I'm right, that's the rest spot. Yeah, so I don't need to go there. And this shows you that it doesn't matter how many times you play these bloody Final Fantasy games, you can still end up getting yourself lost. Stupid me. They're all a maze. Ran away. Once I've worked out where I'm actually needed to go next, then I'll stop running away from all the enemies. But until then, I'm going to flee everything. Okay, I'm back on track now. I need to go down there. Yeah, there's not too many survival games that I can think of that I really enjoyed as survival games. There is Zenki Zero had survival elements in it, and I quite enjoyed that one. That's the dungeon crawler by the same people that were behind Danganronpa. Has a very similar vibe to Danganronpa, actually. It just has kind of dungeon RPG elements and survival elements in there. That's a good one. But other than that, survival's not really my genre. But again, it probably would have been very appropriate for the Disaster Report to have survival elements. I'm actually coming up to the boss right now, so right back on track. Yes, Danganronpa team minus the writer. But I thought the writer that they got for Zenki Zero did a pretty good job of capturing the same kind of intensity, the same kind of weirdness of Danganronpa. the same kind of surrealistic, kind of overbearingly positive but sinister kind of vibe that kind of ran through much of Danganronpa. I thought it was a little bit less satirical in tone, I guess. It was a little bit more outright comical rather than the kind of the social satire that Danganronpa had. But we're splitting hairs here. I think they were both particularly well written games. Here we go. Boss time. Yeah, definitely what the Danganronpa guy has coming next is very intriguing. I'm certainly going to love that. I mean, Danganronpa, along with Steins Gate, and I think that was it. Those two games were really what got me into visual novels. I really started quite late with the genre, and it was kind of the stuff that I played on the PlayStation Vita early on. Actually, no, there was also Hakuoki on the PS3. So those three visual novels were the ones that really got me hooked into the genre. So I'll always have a special resonance with Danganronpa in particular. Also, Danganronpa, the early ones anyway, had the voice of Doraemon as the voice of Monokuma, and that was an inspired bit of casting. a very clever way of subverting expectations, I guess, from hearing that voice. Because once you hear it, and you know obviously that it is the distinctive voice of Doraemon, every time you see Monokuma, you also see like this superimposition of Doraemon over the top, and it just messes with you. It's Doraemon's not that well known, I guess, in the West, but I'm a big fan, and I just couldn't get over that. Like the voice and the character just melded together in this perfectly subversive way. No, I have not played Chaos Head, I don't believe. I played one Chaos semicolon something, because they did localize one of the Chaos semicolon somethings. And that was a pretty twisted game, since the opening scene of Chaos semicolon something was some dude that had like a breakdown and ended up cutting off his arm and eating it because he thought it was like a sausage or something. Chaos Child, there we go. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, Chaos Child. That was an interesting one. I enjoyed that, actually. Okay, so Antlion is the boss we're fighting. I should be able to cruise through this fella, mostly because I'm so over-leveled. And he's countering me and I can't remember why. I can't remember what I actually need to do. But let's hit him with some magic. I actually can't remember how to defeat this boss. I'll just hit him with everything. He'll counter everything, I'm sure. Oh, he just counters physical attacks, does he? Yeah. Rightio. I got it now. That means I'm going to use Cecil as a healing potion dispensary fella. And just cast lots of black magic. Oh, really? I did not know that. I don't know why. But that's a good... Yeah, that is also a good... That is a good bit of casting as well. I guess it doesn't matter if I attack with... His counters don't do that much damage. Because I'm so nicely leveled, I can handle a couple of counters, I guess. Just hit him with magic and... I'll use Edwards for dispensing items, since he doesn't do much damage anyway. Speaking of that series, you know, the Chaos series, the Steins Gate series, whatever. Did you play the dating the dating simulator themed one? What was it called? I can't remember what it's called now. It was recently released on Switch. It's a good time. It's nonsense, of course, but it's pretty funny. Do I think Dead or Alive is dead as a fighting game? I'll be really interested to see what they do next. I think they're stuck in the sense that they can't they obviously can't create a game that is going to get them in with the fighting game scene. I don't think what they've done with their game will allow them to do that. So they'll either piss off the existing fans again by trying to do something that'll get into that fighting game scene, which is not ever going to welcome them anyway, or they can try and appeal to the existing fan base, but the fan base for that kind of fan servicey stuff is not that big, so the production values that are kind of expected from it don't mesh with the blockbuster fighting game that people expect now. So I think they're kind of stuck. I think they need to take a rethink about that entire franchise. What I would like to see is them do something with the characters that do something with some of the characters to establish them as characters beyond the fighting game. I'd like to see some kind of adventure game, or I don't know, a Devil May Cry thing, or just go back to the Ninja Gaiden style of gameplay and give Kasumi a game to play. Give Kasumi a game in that kind of structure. I think there's room for that because Dead or Alive is really strong in terms of its characters. I think they could develop the characters beyond the scope of fighting games where they're all pretty limited, let's face it. I really don't think that that's the case. I mean, I think Koei Tecmo does definitely care about Dead or Alive. Just seeing the amount of effort they put into monetizing it, you don't try and you don't invest the kind of money that they had in trying to get more money out of the consumer, out of the fan base, unless it's a major property. I think Dead or Alive is still Koei's major property. I just think that they need to have a rethink about how it sits in the fighting game space. Okay, so after all of that, that conversation went places while I was fighting the antlion. I've now defeated the antlion, which is good for me. That means I can get the item, the ruby thing, sand ruby, all one word. They didn't use spaces all the time in old JRPGs. And now I need to go back and save Rosa, push the narrative on further. We're making good time. That dungeon only took half an hour. I think certainly there was a lot of energy that went into Neo 2, and Team Ninja was definitely heavily focused on that. But I think Team Ninja is a pretty big development team, so they could have worked on two things at once quite comfortably. I don't think that Dead or Alive 6 happened because of lack of effort. I think they did put a lot of effort into it. I just don't think it would hit the notes they wanted it to. Oh, I see. Just because of memory. That's why. So you could only have 8 characters for names and stuff because of memory issues, I guess. Just think about making video games back in those days where you were so limited in terms of what you could do. You actually had a limit to how many characters of text you could do. That just the amount of creative work that went into old games. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to do a stream for retro games, because I honestly think that there's a lot of creativity that went into retro games that we don't see anymore. There was a working within quite severe limits, and because they were working within such severe limits, what they came up with was often so good and so impressive. So yeah, I wanted to really highlight that through these streams. That was a big part of it. Yes, that's one of the things, it's like items had these really weird abbreviations because they had so few characters to work with. I played Game Boy, the original Game Boy, a lot as a kid. I was always a handheld gamer first and foremost. I actually got into the Super Nintendo and stuff later on. And yeah, the extreme limits on things in, Legend of Final Fantasy, And in terms of the graphics as well, like the original Game Boy actually had a limit to how many sprites it could have in a single row on screen. So when they did like a port of Space Invaders, they actually had less Space Invaders on the in the Horde whenever you started a new level, simply because they just couldn't render them all consistently on screen at once. So yeah, just working with such limits, I always find that really impressive. It's the same reason that I find photography in black and white to be interesting, because while they're using modern cameras and technology, they are limiting themselves in terms of what they can do. There's a lot you can do with color that you can't do with black and white, and you need to change your mind, change the way you think about capturing photos when they're in black and white. And I'm also a big fan of kind of miniature painting, because they're working with such severe limits again. So yeah, retro games kind of fit into that same thing. The creative overcoming of limitations. I'm not sure I actually wanted to charm a basilisk, but anyway, he'll be dead soon. So we're just retreating out of the dungeon. I did not see a way of fast-tracking my way out, so I think I had to backtrack. If not, I've just wasted a lot of energy and time doing so, but it is what it is. I'm pretty sure with the game, the 3DS, I'm pretty sure with the DS remake of Final Fantasy IV, the 3D one, there was actually a fast-track exit out of the dungeon after beating that boss. I don't think you've actually seen it on the stream yet tonight, but there is an enemy that can pop up in this dungeon, which is the same imp sprite, exactly the same. He's just wearing a different color, robe, and I really get a kick out of kind of sprite color swaps, because again, that's something they don't bother to do with modern games, but it's good fun when they do. There we go. Exited. Is Kula a good character, King of Fighters? I don't know. She's alright. I always thought that the one King of Fighters game that would have been right for Dead or Alive would be Athena, but well, after May, but they always overlook Athena for whatever reason. Makes me sad. She could be BFFs with Murray Rose easily. Anyway, we're making our way back to the town, because now that we have that item, we can go rescue Rosa. Spend a lot of time in this town for such a little town. I've got over 10,000 gold. I'm rich. Okay, so we're all healed. Let's go do the next bit. We're going to get a bit of dialogue and narrative going. Once I push these town folk out of the way, here we go. Sand Ruby. I can't remember what the gold piece limit is, but based on the rate I'm going, I'll probably hit that with this playthrough. I'm not finding that I need to spend too much money. So through this cutscene, we're getting introduced to a fella named Golbez. Well, we're being explained who Golbez is. We heard the name for the first time in the stream yesterday, or last week, because he was the one that was responsible for the attack on Ed and his castle. But now we're finding out that Golbez is a part of the villainous plot that the Emperor, that was Cecil's former employer, it's part of his grand plot to take over the world. And once again, we have now we're getting introduced to the crystals proper, because you may remember that at the start of Final Fantasy IV, Cecil's job was to capture a crystal and bring it back to the Emperor, sorry. He did so. There are now 3 other crystals, and once again, your main job is to try to protect those crystals. That's a recurring theme through Final Fantasy. I'm pretty sure every Final Fantasy makes crystal a central plot point in some way or another. Even the more modern ones like Final Fantasy XII, Final Fantasy XV, crystals are a big deal. So that's how they're involved in this game. Now, you may remember that Rydia lost her parents, her mother, an entire town to a fire attack that Cecil accidentally inflicted on her and her people. So she now has a fear of using fire. That's why she hasn't actually had the spell Fire, even though it's a basic Final Fantasy spell. She hasn't had that in her repertoire to date. And I like that too. I like that little narrative element that, as a black mage, her music, her spell list was actually limited by her characterization. That was another thing that was done for the first time in Final Fantasy IV, I believe, for the series. And it's just little elements. The way that the developers were very careful to tell the story using the limitations that they had, but make sure that every part of the game was built around the characters and the narrative that was playing out. It all sounds very simple now, but back in those days, this was all very revolutionary and innovative for a video game. And so now we have a white mage, which is great. And we're going to get a little bit more plot right now as well. Well, it's easy to say it's not an impressive plot now, but again, for its time, this plot was mind-blowing. It was something that was not done before. It was original, fresh. It was complex. There's a whole lot of thematic stuff that we haven't even got to yet, that really is pretty hard-hitting stuff. And yeah, this game just brought it all together in a way that we hadn't seen in games before. And now I'm rather glad that I did level up Edward as much as I did, because, yeah, he has to fight a battle by himself. And this is an important character building moment, because Edward is now mourning his lost love, and she appears to him in this battle. And after this, you know, he has a real moment, becomes a new man. I remember the first time I played Final Fantasy IV, I hadn't leveled Edward enough. I was relying too much on Cecil as the frontline fighter to get me through everything. And yeah, he got really trounced in this battle. Now obviously it's nice and easy. It's a very grim fairy tale style bit of storytelling, that. Yeah, because he goes from being so absolutely weak and hopeless and a really not likable character, but yeah, he has a good character arc. So it's good to see that he does become powerful towards, you know, in the GBA one, because he deserves it. He goes through a lot, does poor Ed. Hopeless romantic he is. Let's go. Okay. So, having survived that, now we have a white mage in the party, which is great. Unfortunately, this does bring one problem that we have with Final Fantasy IV, and that is that the back row can only contain 2 characters. And obviously you want to have the White Wizard and the Caller, or the Summoner, in the back, because they're not exactly frontline fighters. But that does mean that Ed becomes a frontline fighter, which is not ideal. Not sure I've got good equipment for Rosa. And she's also used as a bow, so another reason that she really does belong in the back. No other equipment. Okay, we're all set. But she starts at a good level at least. The other 2 characters, when they've joined the party, they've been at a stupidly low level, but now Rosa is at a good level. Is there? How do I do that? Maybe custom? Nope. Change? Ah! There is 2. Thanks for that. That's better. What am I doing? So now I can make Cecil frontline. And everybody else back. That's better. I'm happy now. Yep. Thanks for that. I didn't want Edward on the front. He's not good at the front. And here we go. So you remember back earlier in the stream, I showed you a mountain that you could get to before, but there was no reason to go there because, firstly, the enemies were more powerful, and secondly, there was a block there. You're about to see what I mean by that, because we are now going to that mountain right here. So this is our next destination. We better save first. Now, I'm 99.9% sure I don't actually need to grind. I'm pretty sure my characters are at the good enough level. But as you can see, the ice there, that previously I couldn't get through because I didn't have any ice magic, because, again, Rydia did not have any in her repertoire. But we're about to have a character moment, a character development moment, and Rydia is about to do the right thing for the party. And now she's learnt Fire, which is obviously a useful spell to have in the repertoire. And she's now over her fears. Character growth moment, coming of age moment, if you will. And now we can go on. Much more tough enemies this time around. But I have plenty of white magic on my side, so shouldn't be a problem. So when you think... Yeah, I don't think the translators really thought about that one. Did not think that one through too carefully. Or maybe they did and that was a joke, but yeah. Coming of age stories are great fun. I studied coming of age kind of narratives a bit when I was at university. I did a lot of children's literature and stuff, and obviously coming of age and narrative is quite common there. So it's just a turn of phrase I use an awful lot because I see it in a lot of games. Okay, so as you can see, the time clock now says 3:32, and if you think about it, we only just now have a party of 4 heroes, so it's taken us a while to get to that point. And once again, to compare the Final Fantasy IV to what came beforehand, where you started with a pretty full party right from the start, this slow accumulation of characters was a really effective way for the developers to introduce each one properly and really set them up as a character. Beforehand, they were all kind of blank slates at first, and you'd only start to get to know them as the narrative went along. But in this way around, you had an immediate sense of character when you met each of them, which made you much more attentive, I think, to what each character was about and what they were doing in the narrative. No, I don't. I don't think that. I don't think there's anything wrong with making that analysis of them, of coming of age stories. That's a perfectly legitimate point of view. I just said that I studied them. I find them interesting as structural works of narrative. I'm certainly not above criticism for the things I find interesting. Let's put it that way. Okay, so this mountain is exhausting. One step more and I have to fight another bunch of bombs. But I think I'm going the right direction. If not, I'll get a treasure chest or something and have to go back. It's fine. I have plenty of magic power to go. I don't want to heal or just Rosa. I think what I like about the coming of age stories is the process that the characters go through. Usually there's some kind of some kind of trauma involved, and I guess how that ends up defining the character as a character is where I find the stories quite interesting and vivid to follow along. Save point right there. Excellent. But I'll get the treasure chest first, since I get another free tent. Free loot means I don't have to use my own. I was right. It was the wrong way to go, but at least I got stuff. Okay, so we'll do a quick save. And admire the background there. You can see all the trees and stuff in the background, the parallel scrolling. That was a feature of the Super NES hardware that we didn't have with the Nintendo. Creates that illusion of depth and makes you feel like you're sky high, and it's a great effect. I love that visual effect. To this day, I think it's a really creative and artistic way of doing it. I mean, when I studied University English, I loved my University English course, to be honest. That was my undergrad major. And I loved it. I don't know which university you went to, but yeah, I thought the course that I did was particularly insightful and interesting and challenging. So, unfortunately, I know that a lot of other people don't have the same experience, and of course, it's the arts, so a lot of universities don't put the same level of attention into the arts, and therefore the course quality can be wildly varied. Oh, Cecil got a level. Excellent. One of my favourite things about Final Fantasy IV is what happens to Cecil in all those levels that you've been carefully accumulating. I'm not going to give it away because it's a really cool surprise that you've got to look forward to. If you haven't ever played Final Fantasy IV, if you stick around on these streams, you're in for a great moment. A truly quality moment in storytelling in video games. But yeah, just look out for it because it's a fair way away yet, but it's a good one. And we're about to meet our next character, which is excellent. I'm not quite sure why why karate moves are a sneeze in Final Fantasy IV. that's a great moment of translation, that is. I love it. I really love it. Achoo! We need more game translations like this, to be honest. I love how they introduce him as Mystery Man, but because of once they have this kind of combat cutscene, they couldn't call him Mystery Man as his name, so they just give away his name before you actually learn it in the narrative. A fun moment of limitations from the hardware, unfortunately meaning that their creative vision wasn't quite able to be met. Mom Bomb. This is the big bomb, I guess. We'll hit it with everything we've got. Call a chocobo or a choke bee. Choc bee. We'll call a choc bee. Only because I like the chocobo. It's probably not the right moment to do it. You never actually need to use the chocobo. Oh, actually it does a lot of damage. Ha! Shows that I've been paying attention. But yeah. It's not the world's most useful summon, it's just chocobos are great to use, so I do it anyway. I'm pretty sure I'll get through this battle safely, so I'll keep using Choc Bee. Mom Bomb got big. Chocobos are... You could probably twist chocobos to be a metaphor for anything, really, because They're the perfect blank slate. They can be whatever you want them to be. Uh-oh. Don't explode. Ah. Please don't explode before I get a chance to kill you. Or at least heal. Who do I need to heal? Who do I need to heal? Everyone's healed. Waste of magic. Anyway. Choc B is not enough. This fella's about to blow. Boom. And now we have to deal with a whole bunch of them. But that's okay. We're more than leveled enough for this. What I will do is I'll use both Rydia and Rosa to keep my characters good and healed, because I'm going to get hit by a lot of different enemies right now. But we're about to see why Yang is a useful frontline fighter, because he has Kick, which damages everything. And does pretty good effort at it too. One down. Two more. Interesting theory you got there. Don't blow up. Not much damage. And I survived the battle. Told you I was level enough. I'll have to think about that. I'll have to have a good think. I'll tell you next time you jump on a stream. In fact, I'll pick the most appropriate fan service game for the opening quote from Sterner, and that'll be your answer. And Karate Man Yang has joined the party. I find pretty much all thought interesting. Whether I agree with it or not is another matter entirely, but I think thought is inherently something worth thinking about. I know that's a very cagey answer, but I think, yeah, I honestly, I haven't really... I'll have to sit down and really have a think about what I think there. Go away, I have to run. All my weak units are now vulnerable. I keep calling them units. I play too many strategy games, you see, so I think of every individual character as a unit. The lovely parallax scrolling going on in the background there, just reminding us how high we are. Whoever built that bridge was an engineering genius. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of this mountain now. Rosa got a level, excellent. Accumulating the levels left, right and centre here, and we would be getting close to the exit if I wasn't constantly being waylaid by random battles. It's one of the things that even the retro JRPG people who try and recreate the classic vibe of these games, most of them have the good sense not to have too frequent random battles. They turn the percentage chance of these things down nicely, because it is frustrating when you are, as much as I enjoy the combat system of Final Fantasy IV, and I do, when you just want to get to the exit, to have, you know, 2 battles in 2 steps is just frustrating. But at least we're getting experience levels as we go along, I guess. And we are close to the exit. Yeah, 5 steps is my limit. And bam! So we're now out. And now we need to rush along to the next town, which is down or up? Can't remember. Maybe down. It's somewhere. I'm about to find it. Possibly went the right way. Yes, I went the right way. There we go. Muscle memory kicked in. See, there's the goblins that I was talking about beforehand that have they're tougher now. They're much more tougher. They're much tougher than the green ones, but they have the red costumes on. Look exactly the same except for the colour of the costumes. I do miss that as an aesthetic choice. There was a real sense of progress, you know, when you'd come along a new enemy and it was slightly different coloured, so you knew you were facing something much more powerful. But at the same time, there was consistency to the world because it was the same creatures. In fact, the Needle is a colour swap from an earlier enemy as well. You may remember from the first stream, if you were there, you would have seen Needlers, or things that look like Needlers but were much weaker. Knights of Azure 3 or Crystar 2, which one do I want? I would have to say that I think that Crystar was complete in itself, and I don't necessarily think there needs to be another one. So I'll go with Knights of Azure 3 just because I don't think we need more Crystar. There are some games that I think are best to let lie with what they offered. Another good example of that would be The Last of Us 2. Why they needed to do another one, other than money reasons, I don't know. But I guess I'll get a chance to review that soon enough. That should be a fun day. And that was a surprisingly protracted battle. Those Needlers were pretty tough. But Yang got a level, which is good. Okay, so that's our next destination. I'm gonna save the game here because it's been over an hour since we started the stream, and I think this is another good place to stop. We've made good progress this week. We've actually gone through not 1 but 2 dungeons. Met couple of new characters. We've got a full party of 5 and things are heating up, so as you can see the experience levels are pretty good, and to be honest I kind of want a little bit of time to do a bit more grinding. Not that I'm actually at a pretty good level right now, but again I don't want to expose people who are watching to the endless grind, and as you can see Yang and Rosa both could use a little bit of leveling up I guess before the next play session. So thanks as always for joining in on the stream. Thanks for chatting with me as we played. It's been a pretty good night of discussions. We've covered a lot of stuff, and have a good week. The next stream for DDNet will be Friday night when we do something a little bit fan servicey. What that will be, I don't know yet. I now need to pick something out. I guess that's a Sterner quote. So that would epitomise a Sterner quote. So yeah, I'll have a think about that. I'll come up with something fun to play. Otherwise, have a great week, and we will see you next time.